PX service motorbike and personal hand drop items from residents. The Nelson mail delivery is excellent, handled by either motorbike service or vehicle service. Now the Paxter width is 1.2 metres. Are they to be NZTA registered as a quad bike, whereby they could use the road? And will helmets be compulsory? Would there be a commercial fee levied by NCC to use our public footpaths in this way? Those are some of the questions that I have. I do not think it is safe or appropriate for New Zealand Post to be given approval to use quad bikes, Paxters, on our footpaths. It is simply a commercial enterprise and undertaking to move into deliveries of online goods, plus pamphlets and mail, to the detriment of our legal footpaths users. By my way, this is an intrusion. So that's my report. I'm happy to take a question or two. And
thank you, Malcolm.
If there's any.
Does anyone have any questions? Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the timely presentation. I'm curious, you don't have a problem with mobility scooters on the footpath?
I have included them in here.
But do you have a problem? I mean, you've listed...
No.
Okay, so...
Not at all.
So I'm just wondering, with Paxters, they're kind of like large mobility scooters. If the rule was they had to give way to pedestrians, would that be appropriate, do you think? Is it the actual equipment, or is it the fact that it's a commercial activity that bothers you?
It's the size of the machine.
Right.
1.2 metres wide, and streets in Stoke, Saxton Road and places down to 1.5 metres, 1.2 metres. Parts of Suffolk Road are down to 1 metre in width, and some of the streets out there have a pole in the middle of the footpath because of the way it was configured way back when that subdivision was done. So parts of Manson Ave, the actual footpath is down to 1.2 metres. So it is quite an intrusive machine that will be used, and I don't think it's appropriate for a footpath user, say in Champion Road, where it's down to 1.2 metres, and it goes for probably 100 metres like that, to be faced with a Paxter coming along and using that area. So it's a legal right for people to be using a footpath.
And just so, through the chair, if it's okay, just because I am interested in this whole topic, are you saying that you don't think people should be able to skateboard or ride scooters on the footpath?
No, I'm just using that instance as an example of what other users are there.
Yep.
And people do find skateboarders intrusive. I know I do, especially bikers. I'm in the biking game, and it disappoints me to see able-bodied cyclists using our footpaths. Even coming into town this morning, Waimea Road, and along towards the college, it was quite disparaging to see the number of school children riding on the road where there was a legal shared pathway they could have been riding on.
Sorry,
so the City Council was doing a great job.
Do you mean children riding on the footpath?
No, they were on the shared footpath.
That's what I'm saying.
Like the cycle footpath area that's been constructed over Bishopdale.
Okay.
Separate altogether.
Right.
It's available.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Barker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Malcolm, ex-Councillor Malcolm. Great to see you here again. I'm interested in your views and the people you're representing, whoever they may be today, about the standards of footpath that the council now has. We have got a new policy with our footpaths that they are being designed for the convenience of people, not vehicles and cars, so they're being made level. And yesterday morning, the council had a long-term plan consultation process underway with the elderly of Nelson. And footpaths were one of their major concerns. I think in terms of safety in our community, footpaths for them are a major concern. Are you, well, let me put it another way and add another thing. They were concerned about flax growing over footpaths and tripping people up. And I think you've mentioned here overgrown from the gardens. But are you happy with the new rules that council has in terms of its standards for footpaths?
Well, absolutely. I think that is a very valid point that the City Council's picked up on and doing something about it. So it is not easy for some people to be using even mobility scooters going over crossings or down crossings.
Which is being fixed by the level footpaths.
Yes, that is an excellent move that the city have done.
And will alleviate some of the problems that you've mentioned.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're on to it.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Malcolm, when we had a presentation from NZ Post, I raised the issue of why couldn't they use cycleways? And they said that NZTA said they couldn't. Do you know why?
Maybe they're some of them are shingle surfaces, I don't know. But it seems strange to me. If they can use a footpath, they could use cycleways. But
yeah, that's what I thought, because they're not going to deliver to every house, are they?
no, but there's not many houses along a cycleway as such, like the Great Taste Trail or whatever. The one over Bishopdale Hill is quite wide. We have mobility scooters using it. Yeah, I don't know what their reason would be.
Right. Thank you, Malcolm. I wish to bring your attention that we do have our officer in the gallery who is going to bring a report to shortly to another committee meeting, and no doubt she's taken note of your concerns as well. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Right. I now invite Richard Sullivan to make his presentation. Welcome, Richard.
Morning. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks for letting me speak today. I just want to talk about a risk to infrastructure. The Marsden pipeline bursting was a classic example of what happens when little accidents become very major problems. It's caused a major disruption. It's just it seems to have been a worker inadvertently damaging a pipeline, and there was a lack of warning signs for that person. That individual is obviously very worried and has gone into hiding, and in fact, the fact that it's a digger the idea that it's a digger operator caused the damage is only speculation. So this individual fears for the consequences, and has caused there is a major issue that may or may not be their fault. Now this strikes a chord with me and my family. We have critical infrastructure running through our farm. Now, one of them is now a water pipeline. It's unmarked, goes over a right-of-way that our neighbours use. The pipe, in our view, was never buried deep enough. We raised concerns at the time. The fibre optic cable that runs alongside it was breached twice by City Council contractors early on in its life. I believe if it was broken a third time, would severely hinder its ability to work. The warning tape, first of all, we have neighbours who use the right-of-way. They regularly carry out drainage activity, making sure that the water is out of the water table, and they use diggers and tractors, heavy machinery going over the pipe. The pipe is unmarked. We have warned them that there is an issue, but the lack of markings leads to complacency, or indeed they might not even realise exactly where it is. Warning tape above the fibre optic cable has been exposed for some time. In fact, It was a year ago, we sent an email to the infrastructure team saying that it had been exposed. We've also invited some members of this committee to come and have a look if they were keen, but we've had no visit or action from any council staff or contractors, and yet we've had another year of weathering and more warning tape has been exposed, in fact come away. My partner delivered some to the council about 2 weeks ago to show that actually this is a serious problem. It's unclear who has responsibility for the routine inspections. Is it the council? Is it the contractor? The people who put it in? Is it us even? We would welcome a regular routine inspection, and being part of it, that regular contact would make us feel more secure. It would also improve our ability to maintain the area, and we believe enhance the security of the infrastructure. The pipe is at further risk. We have lately a neighbour has been undertaking tree felling nearby. The tree is on the right of way now that it's fallen over. But I mean, if you think back to the Marsden pipe one, the idea was that it was digging quite some distance away from the pipe that caused the issue, the tree roots. So it is possible that, you know, tree felling, a good distance from the pipe could cause the trouble. And I think it would be extremely unfair if our neighbour, who is doing a good job by clearing their trees, was to be blamed for a pipe failure when, you know, this issue has been known about for quite some time and the pipe isn't actually marked. We believe prevention is better than cure. I'm very keen, came along today because I think this committee really needs to know that be aware of the risks and the potential for failure. The see no evil policy just doesn't work. You know, it ends up being far more costly, and you know, we've seen that here in town as well. You know, with surfers surfing with the turds and brown water coming out of the taps, the Saxton Pavilion. I mean, there's plenty more, right? Well, we've already got alligator cracking on Waimea Road. It was only fixed a year and a half ago. It's ridiculous. So this for the record, and really we do not know what more we could do to try and protect this critical infrastructure asset. So happy to take questions.
Right. Thank you, Richard. Anyone have any questions of Richard? Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, two questions. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Richard, for your submission. Two things. One is the pipeline on your title? Is there an easement or something registered on your title?
Yes.
There is. Okay. And the other one is, I'm not aware that the report, the investigation of the Marsden pipeline at Ruakaka has been completed. Is there something that's come out in the last few days that...
Yeah, well, it turns out about 2 or 3 weeks before the breach, they increased the pressure in the pipeline, the amount that was being delivered per second, and it's quite possible, and they hadn't tested it prior, whether it could take that.
So is the investigation finished and there's been a report published or made public, or was this just...
that was made public. The investigation isn't finished yet.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Rory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Richard, for drawing this to our attention. Forgive my ignorance, but could you tell us a bit more about the warning tape that you talked about and how that works? And can you also tell us what happened when you saw more of that warning tape? Did you contact the council, and what response did you get?
Sure. So when they bury the pipe, they build a trench, and at the bottom of the trench is the pipe, then there's a fibre optic communications cable, and then there's a warning tape above, which is like, so when you dig, you hit the tape and it tells you don't go any further, you're in trouble. I mean, like I said, we never thought that was ever deep enough, and it's proving to be the case. So when the tape was exposed, we sent an email to the I can't remember who, someone at the council, and they said they'd be up when the weather was better. Now that was last October.
Through the chair, so it's just been exposed by erosion, by weather,
That's right.
by time,
Yeah.
right? Did you follow up on that email at all?
Yeah, well, we've mentioned it a few times. We mentioned it to councillors and stuff like that. But, you know, there's only so much you can do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Great. I mean, Mr. Chairman, I'd be very interested to know why we don't have a kind of regular inspection of this infrastructure, given its importance, and particularly given that it appears to be becoming vulnerable. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions of Richard? Thank you for your presentation. What we will do is that I'll have discussions with Mr. Laverdis and we'll follow up on your items that you've raised and we'll see if we can get some resolve for you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Cheers.
Okay. Now we go to item 5, confirmation of minutes, on pages 7 to 11 of the agenda. Would someone who was at that meeting like to move that that's a true and correct record of what occurred? Councillor Skinner, seconder. Councillor Matheson, any discussion? Right, I'd like to put it then. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, we'll go to item 6, and that's pages 12 to 14. Are there any comments from anyone relating to page 13?
Me again,
Councillor
sorry,
Lloyd?
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, on the opportunities for Waimea Road, the first page of the status report, it talks about the pedestrian severance across Rocks Road and options under investigation. I remember in the last council when we decided to look into perhaps making it safer for pedestrians. It seems like a very long time ago. And I'm just wondering why, you know, a year into this next council, we still looking at options. And I wonder if I could get some feedback on that, please.
Yeah. Mr. Laverdis?
So through the chair, that's been that has been raised. It was raised last calendar year, and it has always been the advice given to this committee that those 3 items that were raised, opportunity 3, opportunity 4, and opportunity 7, would be investigated this financial year, and the updates have accordingly reflected that. The opportunity 7, as has been reported, is complete. The opportunity 3 for the bus stop is detailed design is already underway, and with respect to opportunity 4, the pedestrian severance, that work we were planning to consult with the affected residents towards the end of the calendar year. So this has been the case for the last 12 months, so in terms of how this fits into our works program.
So through the chair, that opportunity 4 is the one I'm interested in. All things being equal, how long do you think before we make it safer for people to cross Waimea Road?
Through the chair, you can see the latest comment that I added into there in terms of both opportunities 3 and 4 need to be considered in light of the recently released program business case by the NZTA. We need to consider all those things now. We have new information to hand. We'll need to work through that, and I cannot give you an answer in terms of when we'll have something across Waimea Road, because we've been presented with something that we need to take into consideration, and I don't know what the outcome of that will be. We're in those stages.
Okay, so through the chair, effectively does that mean it's on hold until we find out what's happening with the Southern Lake?
Through the chair, no, we still continue to work through what those options are, but we need to take into consideration the views that came through from the program business case. We cannot work in isolation, so we need to make sure that whatever we put down reflects where we're going, and it's not a temporary solution. It may be well that we put something in temporarily, but all we're saying is we just need to take a stock take. We've got additional information, and we'll see where that goes in relation to how we take this project forward. The time frame through the chair, I can't tell you what that time frame is.
So, Mr. Chair, given that we can't tell what the time frame is, personally, I would prefer to see something temporary going on Waimea Road to make it safer for people to cross the road than this continued limbo.
Right, thank you. Page 14.
Can I interrupt you, Mr. Chair? I know I'm not being rude, I just want to interrupt you for another reason. Nellie, can you come down and join me, please?
That's actually an instruction from the chairman.
You have to come here,
Up to
actually.
here. Our deputy mayor has a story to tell.
Yeah, you're sitting there. Because we want that camera up there. Someone could be watching. I'm going to tell you a story, and it's really unfinished business. As some of you know, I go for a morning walk down Parkers Road onto the beach. I put on my headphones and listen to the latest releases from Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby and people. And I walked down the beach this morning, and this was earlier this year, and just as I was heading off towards the airport, I noticed this, I thought was a dog in the stream next to me. And so I went across and had a look, and it wasn't a dog, it was a wee lad of about two, playing in the stream. And this is 6:45 in the morning, it was only just becoming light. So I hauled him out, and he immediately turned around and jumped back into it again. And I thought, well, I've got a problem here. There's no one around. There was no parent, there was no one, except me and this wee lad in the stream. So I tried again, I got him out, and he jumped back in again, and I thought, well, I'm not going anywhere here. And then out of the mist arrived a young lady to walk her dog. And it was Nellie. I thought, I've got some help. So we had a big talk about this. We still couldn't find any owner, could we? No mother, no father, nothing. So Nellie took charge of this young fellow, and we were thinking about it. She put him down, he took off. And this young fellow could move, I can tell you. And despite the fact that I've won medals at the Olympics, I was never going to catch that kid. But the gazelle took off. And just as he was about to jump, well, did he jump into the estuary, didn't he? He jumped into the Waimea estuary. She grabbed him and hauled him out. Put up a hell of a fight. Still no mum or dad. So we decided to ring the police, which we did. And we gave them a description. We were busy talking about what was going on, and this lady appeared from end of Parkers Road and ambled up to us, and I said, are you the mother of this child? And she said yes. And I said, well, Nellie's just hauled him out of the water. And she said, oh, he loves water. This kid's 2. So we had a bit of a wee chat, didn't we? And then she said thank you and walked off. And I think we timed it at about 20 minutes. We had this child to ourselves and no parent. And, you know, I think you went and finished walking the dog, and I went for my walk, and then we felt pretty stunned that this would have happened to us. We happened to be there. And while I found the kid, I think Nellie saved his life. Rachel.
Nellie, yesterday I was here to give awards for the Royal Humane Society Bravery Awards, and if I had a way to get you on that list I would have, but in absence of being able to do that and knowing that we are going to be having to say goodbye to you soon, the Deputy Mayor and I wanted a way of acknowledging your service to our community, because I think what Nellie did potentially saved a young boy's life. Will certainly set up a signal to a family that this is a young child that needs some supervision, obviously has got a serious interest in water, and but for an ambling old chappie with his Frank Sinatra and his headphones, and a very capable fast runner who could grab hold of this young man, I'm not sure what would have happened, and we wanted to acknowledge your service. For those of you who don't know, Nellie is departing soon, and I want to acknowledge your soon-to-be father-in-law and soon-to-be brother-in-law who are here today. Unfortunately, your partner can't be with us because he's already departed to another job, but hopefully he's watching online at this point in time. So do you want to give him a wave? Hello. So, on behalf of the city, I just want to award you with a certificate of appreciation for what we're calling outstanding community spirit. And for those of us who have worked with Nellie, we know that that goes through all of your work while you've been here. We've loved working with you. But this particular day, you did something that was absolutely outstanding. So congratulations and a small thank you on behalf of the city. Well done. Nellie is very shy, so this is well outside her comfort zone.
Paul forgot to mention the part where he actually turned around and said, is this your child? So, no, thank you very much. I've been here nearly, coming up 3 years in January, so it's been an awesome time here, and looking forward to new adventures. My partner's got a role in Palmerston North. Apparently there are 1,000 hours less sunshine hours, so yes. But thank you everyone, it's been awesome.
Okay, good one.
Thank you.
So I think we'll call just a quick recess for a moment. After that pleasant interlude. And we'll now go back to page 14 of the status report. Any queries from anybody relating to that? First item, second item there. Okay. All right. All right, it's been moved. Do we have a seconder to receive that report? Thank you, Councillor Matheson. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we go to item 7, Chairperson's report. I guess most of you have read that, pages 15 and 16. Does anybody have any queries of it? Would you like to discuss that with Mr. Davies at all? I think it's, in fact, I'd like to invite Mr. Davies to come to the table. It's of very high significance that we are facing this present situation. And Shane, if you'd like to just fill in any gaps for us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What we did was we put together our program of works that we wanted to tender, and we sent it to Civil Contractors New Zealand, who represent our local contracting industry, and just asked them about their availability for the time frame, or about the availability of their resources to complete the program we'd proposed. And they came back and alerted us to the fact that they're extremely busy, and in some cases they wouldn't be able to tender for some of our work until as late as April, May next year. Not all contractors, but some. And we've noticed that we're getting fewer and fewer contractors tendering for our most recent tenders, simply because they don't have resources able to do it, or the prices are very high. And when we drill down to the detail, we find that they're hiring a lot of the plant and a lot of the resources to do the work, because their own resources are committed elsewhere. So I just, through Councillor Walker, I just wanted to make you aware that an option available to us to improve the amount or the competitiveness of our contracts is to provide a longer period for the work to be undertaken. So we're not suggesting that the work takes longer than it should. It would take the same amount of time, but we give the contractor the ability to program that within a time frame that better suits them, and that they can price more competitively. So if we need to move a project beyond a financial year, we'll come back to council and seek approval to do that.
Thank you. We have a question from the Mayor.
Well, if it could just be a comment through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to thank you for bringing this report forward, and thanks Shane for the way that he's approaching this. I know that Nelson City Council is very highly regarded by the Contractors Federation. The relationship is very good, and one of the things that they've given me feedback over in the past is the way that we manage our tendering process and the early tendering that we brought in a few years ago, and how that allows them actually to think about their work program as they move forward. Yesterday I met with Standard & Poor's. They're here to, as they do annually, to assess our credit rating, and this is of course one of the matters that they do take into consideration. And I think the approach that Shane is taking, or has taken previously with the early tendering, and now looking at how we manage what is a very busy capital program across the top of the South Island, is a very sound one. It leads to our financial prudence. It supports our very high credit rating, and it's important that we continue to do that, because that high credit rating impacts on the cost of borrowing. So every step we're making here to ensure that we manage those funds in a prudent way, if it means that we have to move those projects slightly across a few months into the financial year, but still gain the project being able to be delivered by local contractors, and secondly at the price that we've budgeted, then I think that's a good step. So thank you.
Thank you. Go Councillor Matheson, McGurk, Rutledge and Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just endorse what the Mayor said, but adding another dimension to this, Shane, are we experiencing any labour cost blowouts?
Through the Chair, we've had a couple of contracts that have the tender prices have come in higher than our estimate, and we've either been able to manage that by negotiating with the contractor or the preferred contractor if that's appropriate, and in a couple of instances we've returned to the market and re-tendered to try and get a more competitive price.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Probably just following on Mayor and the Deputy Mayor question. Are we still continuing with the early tendering process?
Through the Chair, we have where we can. One of the challenges we have is that the way that our financial year works, often all our projects become available at once, so we try and stagger them so that we haven't got a heap of work coming on to the market at a time. And one way of getting ahead of that is to early tender if we can. So if the projects are available to early tender before the start of the financial year, we'll seek approval and do that.
Yeah, I suppose the question is if the contractors are knowing that this is the work coming on stream, and they can, you're still able to schedule it throughout the financial year.
Through the chair, where we can, often work can't be tendered through winter or can't be constructed through winter. So we are limited slightly by the construction season, but where we can, we will.
Thanks. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you, and appreciate not a member of the committee, so thanks for letting me ask a question. I think my question really follows on exactly from Councillor McGurk's, and you mentioned about no construction over winter. Do we have specific rules in place? I know this came up in Auckland recently where contractors were saying that they could do work outside of the time that council allows them to do work. Do we have those sorts of rules, and is that something we may need to consider relaxing?
Through the chair, the only strict embargo we have is work in the CBD during the Christmas period. And the only other restriction I would suggest about working in winter are there are certain activities that can't occur, like certain resealing activities can't occur in winter because of the temperature. So those sorts of things. And if we have earthworks happening through winter, we're just subject to the weather. Wet periods mean that the construction might take longer to dry out before other stages can continue.
So there's no specific council rules that are potentially needing to be looked at to free up more time in a year?
Through the chair, not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, great.
Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Davies. With your crystal ball gazing, is there a light in the end of the tunnel? Do you think there's a period of time when we'll get over this issue? Well, it's not our issue, but becomes our issue.
Through the chair, I assume there will be. It seems to go in cycles. I'm not sure, and I guess that's the best we can do is work with Civil Contractors New Zealand and try and make sure that we're working together to program this work as best we can.
And a quick one there, and I know it's impacted my committee and some of the projects as well. Is this wholly due to the Kaikoura earthquakes, or is it a combination of issues that come up cyclically?
Through the chair, I think the earthquake has contributed to it, but I also think the market's a bit more buoyant at the moment because I think there's a bit more development happening as well. So all those projects are competing for resources.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sitting here wondering whether the Queen's Garden work has been pulled on this. Through the chair, it's still in our program, and we're hoping to tender it very soon. It's quite unique work. It's construction work, so perhaps it won't be affected by the kinds of things, the earthquake-related stuff that is affecting our other projects. But yeah, we'll tender and see. Through the chair, no. We tender when we're ready to tender, and we've got to achieve our program. So we're certainly not pushing one project ahead of another, and neither is the contractor. I think they're just trying to ensure that they have a continual work program, and I guess making hay while the sun shines. I'm not sure of the specific details of Queen's Gardens, but it is to be tendered. In fact, I can't recall.
Yes, so through the chair, what was a project last year, and the money was carried over, and I understand that it will be tendered within the next month or so. The people, I just like to say, there's two sorts of construction out there. There's the civil construction, which has been largely affected by the Christchurch earthquake, as well as the subdivisions. Projects like, as Mr. Davies indicated, projects like the toilet block is a different contracting fraternity that tenders for those. They're typically not your civil contractors. So that's why, as Mr. Davies indicated, we're not sidelining any projects in lieu of those because there's a different market that we're appealing to. And those non-civil works are still being programmed and tendered out accordingly. And do I think that there's a light at the end of the tunnel? There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. We are in troughs and peaks. Kaikoura, they're still committed to opening up the road. There's still a lot of works happening out there, but there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. It does go in peaks and troughs. We're just in one of those troughs, and we've been riding on the peak for a very, very long time. So we're just at the bottom of a trough at the moment.
Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering what this is likely to mean for the Modeller's Pond, which is a really big project, a very expensive project, and I suspect the longer it takes to get underway, the more it will cost. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Through the chair, I don't think that change should, Mr. Davis should be answering that question. If you can direct that question to me.
Okay,
So,
Mr. Levertis, could you answer that
so
question?
it may or may not. It depends on the type of contractor that we would be getting for that work. It may or may not impact on the cost. The longer, obviously, you leave it, things do tend to cost more. But once again, it's market driven. That's not always the case.
Sorry, just for clarification through the chair, we're hearing that contractors are really busy, they're not able to do work. You're saying that Modeller's Pond might require the services of different contractors, is that what you're saying?
It may well do.
It may well do. I would have thought, with respect, Mr. Levertis, you'd know.
Decision has to be
You'd know what kind of contractors were required to do that work.
Through the chair, when we go to tender, we'll clearly see which sort of contractor tenders for that work. It may not be a civil contractor at all.
Okay. When are we going to do that, through the chair?
We'll if and when we go to tender, we'll analyse that just as we do every other contract.
So through the chair, is there an if? You said if we go to tender. Why wouldn't we be going to tender?
Through the chair, I think this is a subject that's going to be a separate report.
It's coming up
and
shortly.
To get into the details of the Modeller's Pond, it doesn't sit within the dedications of the work and infrastructure. It's probably not the right thing to start discussing that.
You'll be well aware of it when it's coming up.
Okay. Does it come to this committee or does it come to Sport and Rec?
It's going to Sport and Rec.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Mr. Davies. It's really important that we're aware of the implications of what we're faced with at the moment. So thank you very much. Yeah. Just one other item that Councillor Parker.
I've got a question.
Oh.
So if you pass the question,
no, we'll allow you. Yeah.
Okay, but I would just want to suggest that this is important information, and I think this committee would be wise to refer it to the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee for its information.
We'll happily do that. Yep.
We can do that through the chair, yes.
And just one further item relating to the chairperson's report. As most of you will know, I attended the annual Three Waters Conference, National Conference in Hamilton last week, from Tuesday through to Friday. Of huge benefit to me personally, and I'd like to think that that flows on to the benefit of this committee and onto the council. Probably the most important thing that came out of it was a large amount of discussion relating to the Havelock North water problem that occurred, and that's going to have quite wide ramifications throughout New Zealand. I heard comments from quite a number of people that they are going to have a serious look at their water situations, and I think that, Mr. Vertis, you can assure us that our situation is quite different to most other local authorities.
So through the chair, yes, we've had this discussion many, many times. We are very, very different to a number of other councils. We eagerly await to see what's coming out of the next stage of the assessment, because I think whatever comes out will affect all councils in some manner or shape or form. However, we believe that we are well positioned. We have a world-class water treatment plant. We have river runs. We're not reliant on aquifers, and we don't have boreholes. And more importantly, we chlorinate our water and we regularly test our system. So we, when the Havelock event first came out, we assessed all our systems, but we are well placed. We have a totally different situation than what a number of other councils are facing.
Thank you for that. So, it was very beneficial, and I just wanted you to know that it was appreciated going away. Now we'll go to item 8, car park dining update, pages 17. Oh, sorry, yeah, I need to, yeah. I'd like to move that, and it's been seconded, Councillor Noonan. Yeah. All those in favour, my report be received?
Just for clarification, are you adding the refer that it should be officially resolved by the committee
Okay, can we add that we refer that
Through the chair,
report?
we'll add that in, yes, and we
Yep,
can.
thank you. So with that amendment, still seconded, thank you. All those in favour? Carried, thank you. Item number 8, and we'd like to invite the officer to the table, please. Pages 17 to 21.
Good morning, councillors, staff, chairperson. This is simply the required updates to keep you all abreast of what's going on, how many car parks are being taken by dining areas. That's the gist of it. I'll take questions.
Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just through you, Margot, thanks for the report. Now, the trial we've got up at Trafalgar Street, does that have any impact with the arrangements outside the, was it Burger Culture?
Can you...
Well, I see that you've got, is it 2 car parks are being leased out?
Through the chair, yes, that dining area is constructed and is being used outside of Burger Culture, yes.
And the fact that we've got a trial doesn't impact on the arrangement?
It's an existing, as I understand it, and I'm unfamiliar with what is going to be presented to you about that. That is not my project, so I can't really address it. But all I can say that I do know is that I've been told that all existing dining areas are a separate event. Any other questions?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. And it may be a question for Mr. Levertis rather than for Margot. I just want to come back to the policy that sits alongside this in terms of what is being charged for both the capital works and the licence to occupy with these areas. I have a matter that's been raised with me with regard to equity issues around who pays for what. And when this came back to us and we lifted the moratorium, I do recall that we had to also look at some of the policy context that was going to sit there. And I'm just wondering if, Mr. Levertis, you recall what we did then and where that work is up to. Apologies for not having raised this before the meeting. I'm just trying to track this. I had a feeling we were...
I'm going to have to try and rack my brains, or my memory on this one. I think there were 2 issues. The first one was, and bear me, I'm thinking while I talk. The council lifted the moratorium, and there was a process that was put in place that the applications would come in to Margot or to somebody in council, and it sits with Margot, and that she would solicit the views of the relevant staff around council. That would then come through to myself to sign off, to make sure that our asset managers had reviewed those their comments, and that we would then make a recommendation to the chief executive. So, and the chief executive has delegated authority as provided under the Works and Infrastructure Committee to sign those off. In terms of cost, that's something that Margot and the property team look at. So they still enter in a license to occupy, and they get charged the rate that was included in that last Works and Infrastructure Committee, or the one previous to that, where we, and I think it was the previous Works and Infrastructure Committee, where the fees and charges were considered, and those apply to the outdoor dining. There was also a separate issue, and it's coming back to me now, with our street stalls. And yes, I think those are the 2 issues. And the street stalls, there was a council resolution that we would extend the existing street stalls at whatever rate it was, and that we would review that in X number of years, and the CPI was applied. I think so. That there were 2 separate issues. They were in the same report, but 2 separate issues. This issue doesn't relate to the street stalls.
Thank you very much, Alec. That was very good remembering, because you're absolutely right, it was the street stall. So can I just ask then, Margot, what is the arrangement here, say for the Burger Culture site, and you're probably aware that there are some concerns about where the costs are falling on these matters. That what we've got is a scenario where if you want to have to set up these areas, which we've decided are quite important for the vibrancy of the CBD and the type of streetscape we're wanting, that the capital costs of doing these things are quite high because we require quite a standard, the bollards and all sorts of things, that actually that front end cost is having to be borne by whoever needs the spaces, would like the spaces, as opposed to being built into the licence to occupy fee. So I'm just wondering what's happening with these ones, because I'm aware that Sprig and Fern have had to pay theirs up front, but I'm wondering what's happening with burger culture, because obviously we have got, as Councillor McGurk indicated, a trial for closing that street. And in my discussion with the officer who has responsibility for that project and trying to tease this through, I was advised that if that was to become, the trial was successful and we were to move forward, that the capital costs would be borne by council, but then we would charge that in an increased licence fee. And I just don't feel at the moment we've got a consistent policy.
Through the chair, I'll try to address this specifically as I can. The good news for Upper Trafalgar Street, Mayor Rees, is that the capital costs to create those spaces is much lower than in the rest of the CBD. The rest of the CBD outdoor dining on car parks requires a plinth, sort of, a curbing and so forth. On Upper Trafalgar Street, fortunately, the contractors were quite clever and realized one of the things that has to be done is the painted stripes need to be removed. To actually grind those off is phenomenally expensive. Contractor realized that all they had to do was pick up the bricks and flip them. So it's labor, but it's much less than, believe it or not, grinding that off. And then if we ever want those stripes back, we can just flip the bricks. But the most expensive item in all of these, in the entire project, in the entire CBD, are the bollards. Installed, they're about $1,000 or $1,100, labor and item and chains and painting the chains and so forth. If I understand what the intention is, I mean, it's a trial that's going to happen in Upper Trafalgar, so things may change. But I understand that if things go well, the bollards may fall by the wayside. New bollards might not be required.
It's fine, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to work on an additional, we're just giving you notice of an additional clause here, just in relation to this issues of equity, that given this is delegated to the Chief Executive, I actually would like the Chief Executive to look at the issue of charging. So I'll just do a little bit of work on seeing if I can find some words, and I'll come back to you once I've done them.
All right, Councillor Laurie.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Mario, for the report. Through you, I think this is great. Love seeing it happen. Any indication that there will be other businesses or property owners coming forward and asking to do the same thing?
Through the chair, at this moment, the only further, there was the initial sort of rush of just what you're seeing in this report. Those were the only ones, save for Golden Bell did inquire but decided the expense was too high, and so that has fallen by the wayside. I've had NOM inquire. They have no car park space directly in front of them. The new NOM that will be next to Burger Culture. So I've suggested to them that they consider footpath dining. There should be enough space for that. In the rest of the entire CBD, I have had no further inquiry at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner, your answer? Okay. Councillor Noonan.
I can. It's not a scientific poll, Councillor Noonan, but I do often get calls, but I've not really had any. The only one that I've had was from Mr. Thompson. Of the three that have been built on Hardy Street, he had called. He and I ended up having a very lovely conversation, but he did voice concern of the diminishing number of car parks in the CBD. That's the one other. a comment from the owners of the gift shop, Cachet. There's still, I think, do we still have one space in front right now? I'm drawing a blank. We may have used their one space, and they were a little concerned about that. And what I am still working on to address that is to get Uniquely Nelson, now that some of their FETs are over, to get them to work on a group marketing plan for those 3 restaurants and Char and Cachet, to, at that end of the street, do sort of a special marketing interactive, spend so much at one of the restaurants for dinner, get a discount at the gift shop and vice versa kind of thing, to appease them on that.
Thank you for mentioning Cachet, because that is a homeware shop, and if they've not got a car park outside, I'm not sure how people are going to take bulky items home, because actually, I personally use that car park to load heavier items, and they don't have a loading zone in that area. But I think it's something that we need to be really aware of, that if you're taking away areas that people need for short-term parking to collect items that are bulky or heavy, and a lot of us are on our own, so we're not stuck with it, and the shop owners can't often leave their shops. So I think we need to be thinking about extraneous things. So I'm wondering if the chief executive, with the review of the fees and charges, look at actually a little bit further than that, because if we're going to be removing more and more car parks for whatever reason, I think we need to, I'd actually like to see a report at some time reviewing, and it could be 12 months out. I'm pretty flexible on that, but I think we need to have a look and see how it's impacting on normal movement and retail spend, and being able to collect items except for loading zones. And I'm not sure about the loading zones in that area, because those shops won't have anything for that. Everything has to come in the front. So just another thing to think about.
Yeah, I certainly share your concerns that there seems to be a creep of loss of car parks, which does really bother me. And so I think we need to place due emphasis on that. Do you have any?
So through the chair, one of the reasons that we have the check sheet in place in terms of all staff around the council being privy to all the applicants is to look at exactly that. And there may come a time where we actually push back and say, well, we think that a particular area shouldn't have outdoor dining because of whatever reasons, or because the loss in car parks has reached a critical mass, and I don't know what that critical mass is. But we have, as best as we can, a process in place to assess a whole range of things. So we look at loading zones, we look at how people are going to offload. We try and take a holistic view, and we do look at that critical mass. And there may come a time where we actually report back and say, well, we've received 6 applications, we've approved 3, and the following 3 haven't been approved for the following reasons. We may well get to that. And so we have a check system in place for exactly that.
So can I just pursue that just a fraction longer, Mr. Chair, and regarding that car park outside Cachet, where the loading zone, where there was a car park, where you could collect things, is that now gone?
Through the chair, Margot.
Through the chair, I'm embarrassed to say I'd have to check that, whether we took one of 2 or the only one. Right now, I'm drawing a blank. I apologize.
No problem. Thank you. I think it's been noted, and I think it's something that we need to keep an eye on, particularly for shops that have to have their deliveries going through front doors.
All right, thank you. Any further queries at this stage? Now, the addition that our mayor wanted to the resolution, that's almost there. Councillor Skinner?
Mr. Chair, just want to, when it's the right time, opportunity to make comment on it, because I realise it's not a
Yep,
recommendation as such.
While we're
We've
waiting,
got a
yep.
we're just receiving a report.
Yes.
But when it's appropriate.
Are we ready to put it up?
Okay, yep. Could we put it up there, please, Elaine? Here we go. Our new technology is halfway there. There we go. Right. So we have before us then the following edition. I'll give you a moment to read that out for yourselves.
So through the chair, it's delegated to this Works and Infrastructure Committee as a resolution, so that's why it's here. So.
I'm happy to move what's there, Mr Chair, if it's something moved
Thank
already.
you. Do we have a second? It's been moved and second.
And just speaking very briefly to that, thank you for including that addition today. I'm just very conscious that there's a degree of frustration out there at the moment from our CBD businesses that council is investing quite heavily in development in some parts of the city, but in other areas we're expecting all the capital costs to be borne by the businesses. And I do think we need to look at this equity issue. If we're taking a approach to urban design and development in the city, and we're requiring, and rightly so, a high standard of development, I think we need to consider whether we ask people to pay that up front, or actually it's captured in the overtime licence fee. And if I understand that Upper Trafalgar Street is a trial and we're going to bear the costs of that, but I'm also looking at Church Street where we're committing $500,000 to that project. Looking at the middle of Trafalgar Street, we've indicated that we want to do some enhancement there, and there'll be planter boxes coming to make that a more attractive area. And I think where we've got businesses that are wanting to do the same, we need to be seeing how we can be enabling rather than forcing quite large capital costs onto them at the start. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Councillor Barker?
Yes, Mr Chairman, thank you. Mr Levert has talked about when we reach the critical mass. I would like the committee at some stage in the future to give some thought to what is that critical mass. We've got probably a record number of cars ever in our community now, and I think at some stage we should have some idea of, since lifting the moratorium, when has it gone to the critical mass stage.
All right, thank you. Councillor Skinner?
Thank you, Mr Chair. No, some good points there. I think we may have, one sense you may think we have crossed that critical mass. I know back in June last year we passed this over, the moratorium, and for the CO to decide on what and when and how many to be uptaken. But I am concerned about the diminishing car parks and the cannibalising of the car parks. And a good point of difference our CBD has is that boutique, some of it is that boutique shopping, the cash and carry as well, and the convenience where customers can park directly on Trafalgar Street. My fear is that we'll end up back in a scenario where that point of difference is lost and customers will go to another shopping centre outside of our Nelson region for a convenience of parking close outside of their shops. So I'm saying I'm not overly happy with the extra dining areas or parking taken up, because it is a good benefit for that particular business, but there's an offset for the businesses nearby who rely on the easy parking, even though a couple of doors further down, that they lose out, which is pointed out in a bit of a discussion there. And it's a resource, our parking, especially our boutique parking, our convenience parking, where you can unload, jump in and load up, and also for other businesses to load and purchase from. I think we just got to look after them as a bit of care and preciousness. So I just think we're being a wee bit free and easy on that, and it's good to know there's not too many more in the wind yet, and I'm very happy about the addition here, checking out the the costings, etc. On that note, maybe we can offset that by being a bit more vigilant on how our parking is being used. I do see a couple of shop owners on Trafalgar Street parking all day on Trafalgar Street. I won't shame and name those particular businesses individuals, but I will follow that up with staff, but I'm not sure how that works. There's a couple of you I've seen there all day, whether they're rotating their cars very quickly or got some sort of understanding going on. I think it needs to be vigilant, and maybe some other areas we can just keep that turnover, maybe a better turnover on that main street, especially Trafalgar Street. If we're losing actual car parks, maybe we'd increase the quantity or quality of those parking spots.
Councillor Noonan?
Mr Chair, I'm just looking at that, and we need to remove the last three words. I've just checked with the mayor. I don't know that she had it on here. No,
With your leave, Mr Chair, Councillor's quite correct. It's not quite what I had, and we'd like to full stop with your leave to just stop is in place. Okay. Currently, is now. It's not for future applications. That would be what we would prefer. So with your leave,
amend that
otherwise
then?
we'll have to move an amendment.
Yes, sure.
So,
No,
well, I can't move an amendment, and Secretary are happy.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank
No.
you.
So what you're suggesting is that this should cover where we're the ones that we're doing at the moment?
It gives us some flexibility in looking at those.
Okay. So
That'd be right. We've got at the moment we've got existing issues, and they need to be looked at. And this appeared to be, given it's delegated to the chief executive, it's got to go to the chief executive to deal with it. So that's just to allow that to happen.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. So it's been moved and seconded that agree that we receive the report and that we add the additional item in red. So I'll now put it. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, item 9.
Through the chair, we'll have Mr Peter Anderson and Mr Rhys Palmer, who is consulting to council, present the report. If I may just put some context around the asset management plan, if I may, through the chair,
yes,
just before we start. So this is the second of 3 asset management plans that we bring into the Works and Infrastructure Committee. The previous one was the utilities, the 3 waters. This is the next biggest asset management plan. As you will see in the covering report, this asset management plan is a little bit more complex. Well, it's not a little bit more complex. It is a lot more complex than any of the other asset management plans that we are doing. There are a lot of interdependencies. We are linked with the regional land transport plan. We're also linked to the public transport plan, which is also linked to the regional land transport plan. And a lot of those things have an effect on what this asset management plan will ultimately look like. The RLTP, as you know, is in a review stage, and we're working through that process with the RTC, the Regional Transport Committee. I'm sorry for all the acronyms. And as you know, we've also workshopped the public transport with the full council, as well as the RTC, and that will be going out to public consultation. So the outcomes of those 2 processes will influence this asset management plan, and also affects the government's GPS, the policy statement, the government policy statement. So there's a lot of intricacies that all the other asset management plans don't have. And the words and the content of this asset management plan reflects that, and there's a lot of interdependencies. So if you could just keep that in mind when reviewing and answering the questions, is that there's still a lot of water to flow under the bridge with our RTCs, our RLTPs, central government, and a whole range of other aspects that we need to include in this ultimately. And it's a living document. Thank you.
Mr Anderson.
So, through the chair, an apology from Paul Devereaux, who's senior asset engineer. He would have been sitting here today. Mr. Laverdis has touched on most of the points that I was going to pick up on. So I've got Mr. Palmer here from Indicate, who has worked with the asset managers to develop the asset management plan, or the draft asset management plan you have here today. So I'll ask him to give a brief summary and then answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. Mr. Palmer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just give a very brief overview of what I think the key points of this asset management plan are, so that I guess we're starting from the same point. So it's the Transport Asset Management Plan. Nelson City Council has around 270 kilometres of roads, nearly 100 bridges, 420 retaining walls, quite a significant footpath, walkway and cycleway network. And I think an important point is that it totals 43% of Council's assets, a total value of around 800 million. Now, all of those different things are split up into sort of loosely 4 categories. We have the subsidised program, which is largely all of the things that the New Zealand Transport Agency co-invest with Nelson City to deliver. And then outside of that subsidised program are things like footpaths and car parks, which aren't subsidised. And then also there's the bus service and total mobility. They are also subsidised by New Zealand Transport Agency. Now, because the Transport Agency have so much skin in the game, they have required all asset management plans around the country to be developed using business case principles. That's consistent with what the infrastructure manual suggests we should be doing, but you'll probably see in this asset management plan, compared to other asset management plans, a key issues section with some very strong problem statements, and they then flow through the whole document to make sure that we are really articulating the key problems. There are no, they're the key problems, not everything. What the benefits of solving those problems are, the evidence that we have to back that up to tell a full investment story. Now just going to go through some changes from the previous asset management plan. So in the maintenance space, so this is where we're looking after what we already have, we've got some increases in costs for data capture and knowledge. Again, NZTA are driving us to be more and more evidence-based all the time, so we need to obviously know our asset better and better to make sure that when we ask for funding, we can back that up with absolute data.
Can you refer us to some particular pages relating to that?
I guess I've got a whole overview of the whole 400 pages here in one go, so maybe if we can go to specifics in the questions.
Okay.
We've also, I've highlighted in the cover report, an increase of $250,000 per annum to increase the amount of travel demand management activities we do. That's around the promotion of alternate modes, and also making sure that we are able to enable and be ready for technology changes that are on the horizon, so that we can keep a very close eye and be ready to react to those. There's also $235,000 increase in the bus operating costs, and again that's detailed in the report. In terms of renewals, so I just covered a few maintenance changes. In terms of renewal changes, we have increased the footpath renewals from what was previously $300,000 per annum up to $400,000 per annum. We're currently not quite meeting our footpath level of service for condition, and that combined with the increased costs we have to be creating that level footpath to make sure that our footpaths are for pedestrians first is requiring us to up that investment a wee bit. We've got an increase in investment on our retaining walls. That's 2 reasons: 1, condition, and 2, they're a key part of the resilience equation to make sure that roads are able to stay open and be resilient when we have storm events. We have a slight reduction in the sealed road resurfacing budget, so those councillors that were around for the previous asset management plan will know that we had a very large increase from previous AMPs in 2015 for sealed road resurfacing. We've pulled that back in the order of $150,000 per annum based on advice from New Zealand Transport Agency inspections and also the ONRC benchmarking across the country. We've also identified that we need to invest a bit more in the renewal of our CBD elements, our brick paving, our bollards and those sorts of things that were starting to look a wee bit tired and scruffy, and we didn't have enough in the previous AMPs for the renewal of those items. So that's kind of looking after, I've covered the maintenance and I've covered renewals, that's looking after what we've got. I'm now going to just briefly go over the capital expenditure key items, and I do need to highlight, as I've highlighted in the cover report, that there's some large uncertainty around that CapEx program as a result of the Nelson Southern Link investigation that was recently announced. So there's significant projects or big dollars that are in the first 3 years of the AMP is inclusion of the Hill Street Suffolk Road link. It's in the first 3 years, that's the project development. The costs for construction don't come on until a wee bit later. There's a number of cycling projects in this AMP. The Rocks Road to Hunanui network, Anzac Park to Maitai, Maitai to Nelson East, and the development of some crosstown east-west links. And there's also a project, shared project with our neighbours at Tasman District Council at Champion Salisbury Road. So that's in the subsidised space, the projects that would be co-invested with NZTA. In the non-subsidised space, we've got new footpaths, an investment of $350,000 per annum to close missing links, and also an upgrade to Tortoise Street, which again is largely a wee bit of widening and a footpath on the other side. So now happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Reece. Still a bit strange to see you wearing a sticker that says visitor, but welcome back. Hey, just overall, how would you sum up this asset management plan in terms of its commitment to cycling and other forms of active transport compared to previous asset management plans?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it follows a very similar vein to previous asset management plans. There's a number of capital projects there for closing the critical links in the walking and cycling network, and it also proposes an increase around what I talked about earlier, around the technology and the travel demand management aspects, so that we can actually really push that ahead with someone dedicated to be providing that, rather than it being part of someone's role that already has a raft of other things to do.
Okay, through the Chair, in the report it talks about some dissatisfaction being expressed at the level of current level of cycling infrastructure. Do you think that this asset management plan will satisfy those needs, or will those needs continue, the gap between the service and the expectation, will that gap continue?
Through the Chair, I imagine that we will still experience a gap. It will depend how quickly we're able to deliver the projects, and also the demand that is placed on our networks by emerging things like electric bikes and other small passenger type vehicles that we can't even predict right now that might want to use something that's separate to the road network.
Finally, through the Chair, if it's okay, a big part of that, of course, is there's something happening on Rocks Road. How optimistic are you that that will happen during the life of this AMP?
Through the Chair, I think that's once again that's not an issue that Mr. Palmer can comment on. We have indicated in this covering report that we now are in receipt of the program business case, and we need to sit down and work through what that program business case means. So I think for us to speculate as to when, how, and at what cost that will eventually be is speculative at best, and we just need to once again work through with our partners in this, in terms of NZTA, what that actually means for us. So we really just don't know at this moment in time.
So through the Chair, I guess where I'm going with this is, given that that is such a big part of potentially what we might do for active transport in the city, given that there's such a big question mark over that, it's quite possible that we get to the end of this AMP and we actually haven't done that much for active transport. Is that right? Is that possible?
So, through the Chair, an asset management plan is an indication of what we're going to be doing in the next 10 years. There's a lot of things that could come into that equation. As to where we end up in 10 years, we could end up with more or less of what we've actually indicated because of those outside influences. We don't have a crystal ball, and you're right, Councillor Laurie, we may well end up with doing less, but equally we may well end up doing more.
Hope so.
We just don't know. As I said, this is an extremely complex AMP, and there's so many intricacies and links that, and a large portion of this AMP is business as usual. There's a lot of resealings and footpaths, and yes, we do have the Rocks Road and the Southern Link, and those will influence how we do it, as will public transport. But this plan deals not only with those things, which we say there's a holding pattern, but also the business as usual. Crystal ball gazing, I don't know, but we have a plan.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and staff. Well put report. A lot here to take in. Just want to get a bit of reflection from your expertise, and for me trying to assess how we go forward to try and fund this growth and usage. And my thing is about how much of the effect is due to the increase in tourism, increase to immigration, pushing up to 65% up, and then there's also just the increase of our residents numbering. What I'm getting at is, for us to keep ahead of the ball game, we can fund so much from our ratepayers, but there seems to be quite an impact from growing tourism and population growth, and I see that with a 5% increase notable increase of road traffic on Rocks Road, and I know there's a range of things that are coupled in that, but tourism is mentioned as being part of that, and the keeping on top of our infrastructure, roads and our footpaths, etc. You were mentioning that we're just sort of behind the 8 ball on our footpath renewal. Is that tourism? Has tourism put us over the edge as far as keeping up? Would that be a fair reflection? What I'm getting at is, as far as us as a council being able to fund, there's only so much we can fund from our ratepayers, 20,000 ratepayers, and I know when it comes to the LGNZ, we were putting an indication out towards central government to help us with the impact of tourism. Is that what's coming through in the vein of this report, do you think?
Through the Chair, I think there's a number of demand issues, of which tourism is one. You know, we also have a very buoyant economy, and so yeah, there's a number of drivers there, and that's I've got that a whole driver section around all the different things that could be contributing to that. I think you raise a point around the funding, and that is the very reason why the New Zealand Transport Agency co-invest in our local roads to the tune of 51%, is because there's a whole bunch of external things that the individual ratepayers shouldn't have to foot the bill for. So that funding assistant rate of 51% is, you know, not perfect for everyone, but it does vary throughout the country depending on whether you're a rural authority or a metro. So that is the reason why central government also funds this road and transport plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, can one of the officers just give me a indication of the total capital program over the 10 years? What sort of dollars are we talking about here, based on how it's written at the moment? If you direct me to the page, I know it'll be there.
Through the Chair, there's a high-level summary for the first 3 years on page 227 of the full document. So that's the page number of the document, not the page number of the agenda, just to be clear.
Just let me find that, 227. Okay. Thank you. So we're talking approximately 16 to 18 million each year for the next 3 years. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right. Mr. Chair, and I've raised this with you prior to the meeting, so it won't come as any surprise to you. This is, I just say this is a very comprehensive piece of work, and I want to thank Mr. Palmer for the work that he's put into this, because it is a very thorough piece of work. It is comprehensive. It involves significant amount of capital program, significant amount of operational program. There are many aspects in here in relation to key issues in terms of levels of service that I believe this committee needs to be fully over before it's signing out, even in principle as a starting point, because this committee really needs to agree on the key issues, the levels of service, understand the capital budgets. And when I went back and had a look at the processes for bringing asset management plans forward, and you know, for those of you who've been well, all of you have been sitting in the council meeting, and you will have heard me say that every time a chair brings up and a group manager brings up an asset management plan, are you sure your committee is fully conversant with what's inside it and supporting it, so that I don't have to rerun it when we get to the long-term plan? And do you understand where the numbers are, and are you supporting the position? Well, Mr. Chair, I don't actually believe that this committee is across this asset management plan. And when I went back to look at the process for them and the way they were brought forward for the last in the last 3 years, the asset management plan itself in this form went to a workshop so that you could work thoroughly through the plan. It is critical that you understand what is in here, so that when you as chair bring it up to me at council as mayor, you can endorse it and say, yes, in principle, or even in the next worked out version, mayor, you can rely on this for building your long-term plan. And right now, I'm not confident about that. And I would be really encouraging you as chair to spend the time workshopping this asset management plan with your committee, and I would have expected actually that to have been happening today. That if this is the first time you've seen the full document come forward, then that's the time you need to sit down and be very sure that the key issues, that levels of service, that the decisions, and I see one in here that where there's been absolutely no discussion in terms of the including 23.3 million for with a 51% subsidy for Rocks Road cycling project. Well, that is influenced very much on which program's going to go in there. And I understand the timing is difficult, and we want to get that project going forward, but we also have to be cognizant of the fact that until we sit down with NZTA and actually thrash out what it is that we're dealing with their Southern Link investigation, and discuss the issue that some of that was based on a medium growth scenario, which means those timelines may need to move around, then I think we have got some dilemma. But that's probably the secondary issue. The most important issue for me here is that I don't believe that this committee has had sufficient time to digest what is in here. And I look at this, and I know Councillor Barker's already signalled to you this at the start, that this is not the only document you're receiving today. You're receiving another very large asset management plan. And for anybody, and in fact, who is on the Audit Risk Committee, they're also receiving another bundle of documents they've got to deal with today. And I'd rather you did this thoroughly than you did it in principle today, essentially pushed it through, because my concern is that you'll run out of time to come back and do it thoroughly. You really need to put the effort to it now, so that when I get it up for the long-term plan, I can rely on it.
So through the chair, I think all of those comments are valid. As I indicated, I think the process that we followed in connection with our asset management plan, so the process that we followed with utilities, for example, is no difference to the process that we're following now. In actual fact, I think we've had more workshops on the roading, and I'm just looking at item 4.2. We've had one in March, May, and June, and we believe that we have taken those comments that we've received from the committee and from those workshops and included them in this asset management plan. In terms of, so I hear what Her Worship the Mayor is saying. I do think this has been workshopped quite a lot. I'm unsure whether we have the ability to, this is a living document, and I think this will change. This will change after we've had a discussion with NZTA. This will change when we've had when we figure out who's in government. There's a whole lot of things. This will change when we go to consultation on our public transport plan. This will change when we finish our review of the RLTP. I'm just unsure at this moment in time, and it also comes to the question from Councillor Barker in terms of the solid waste and whether that can go over to November. We have been working on a time frame to make sure that these have all come to the committee to sign off to guide the LTP, and it's purely a guide, by this date. Our next opportunity, and to find any space in the diaries to workshop this again and to bring it back to the Works and Infrastructure Committee by November, is simply just too late for us. We have what we have in front of us. As officers, I genuinely believe that Peter and his team have done a particularly good document. I think it's based on the complexity and the number of workshops that we have. I believe that we have encapsulated the essence of what was described. I simply don't think we have the opportunity and the time again to workshop this with councillors and to bring it back to Works and Infrastructure to guide the LTP. I do say as the GM, Infrastructure, that I think that what we have before you is a comprehensive document that I believe sets the scene for what could guide the LTP. Not to say that it won't change, and it does change. All our asset management plans do change. But I do believe that what we have in front of us is a culmination of those 3 workshops and a particularly good asset management plan, which the Mayor has alluded to guide the LTP. Not to say that it won't change, but I simply don't see us, and I have had a chat with Nikki MacDonald just in terms of Councillor Barker's comment, for us even to move solid waste over to November sort of moves us outside of how we're going to guide the LTP that we're busy working with the Worship the Mayor. So that places constraints on us in a already busy timeline.
All right, thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm regarding the plan at the moment as a placement until we find out what happens with whatever and whoever is the government, because it can have major changes to this plan. And those are forces outside our control. But at the present time, this is what we've got until those discussions are held, if they're held at all. I want to just change it slightly and try and get a bit of an understanding under problem 2 with regard to signage. And I didn't get a chance to discuss this, but on big page 32, problem number 2, it says a recent sign inventory and condition assessment has highlighted significantly more assets than were previously estimated. The survey counted 6,163 signs, compared with the previous valuations of 2,910. Where were they hiding? Can you just wrap something around that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the key point there is previously asset systems were not representative of what was out on the ground, and we knew that what we had in our asset systems wasn't up to date. And when we went out and did an inventory, that confirmed that understanding, and we now have a very good knowledge of what that asset is worth and what its condition is. And that just, I guess, shows the progression as we go through, apply more and more asset management to all of our assets. We gain better knowledge, and we're able to then better manage those assets.
Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking at page 63 of our agenda, page 36 report, key assumptions in developing the financials, and there's a couple there that are probably worthy of at least a further explanation, and looking about the maintenance renewal costs of the revoked state highway actions as a result of the Southern Link project haven't been included, but it would have been helpful to have a reason why they haven't been included. Would have been helpful, and a couple of other assumptions there about that the public transport will remain relatively static. As I would have thought, when we're looking at trying to increase the levels, and perhaps as our population demographics change, there's probably an opportunity for that to be increased. Another one is the energy costs governing behaviour or vehicle use, other modes of transport, will it increase or decrease significantly? And I'm just wondering if, even minor fluctuations, whether it gets cheaper or it does actually affect behaviours. I'm just wondering a bit more comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the first item around Rocks Road and Te Hunanui Drive. So we've excluded those costs from the makeup of this, because we don't know whether it's going to happen or not, and as has been talked about already today, there's still a lot more water to go under the bridge before those decisions are made. But even if those costs did come to bear on council, I think it's important to note that they would be at the very end of the period of this asset management plan, and because we don't have good knowledge on that right now, they've been excluded. In terms of PT, public transport, we've mentioned there that one of the assumptions is that that will stay largely static. I guess what we're saying is we're not in this plan planning for a major step change in use. We have in our levels of service a 2% increase over time, but not a major step change in use. So that's what that is signalling. And then I think your third one was around energy costs, and that was more in relation to the very significant costs that we have for power, which is to operate our street lights, rather than energy costs for the way that we travel, from memory. Oh, sorry, apologies, I didn't read that. Sorry. Yeah, I think what we're trying to get at there is within the next 10 years, whilst we will get a larger uptake potentially of electric vehicles and the like, that they're not going to change significantly the number of vehicles on the road, and we might get some changes in the future around, I guess, technology driving ride shares and things like that as a result of energy costs, but we're not seeing that they're going to be in the near term or in the short term.
Thank you. Two from me. Just continue perhaps a bit on that theme that on page 33 you've got problem 3 talking about the ageing population, and the consequence, Nelson will need to lead the national change to the transport system to meet the needs of the ageing population. Why do you say that Nelson is going to need to lead that, particularly as if you take the main urban centres, take Auckland out of that population forecast? Nelson's actually not ageing anywhere near as much as perhaps headlines often suggest. And then following that, we've also said that we're not going to significantly change the transport mix. So are those two things in sort of arguing in different directions?
Through the chair, so the reason that we put in those cause and consequence statements around Nelson will have to lead the national change is because Nelson and also our neighbours Tasman and Marlborough are going to have twice the New Zealand average of over 65 people made up in the population. So I guess the top of the south, and there's also going to be some clusters elsewhere around Tauranga that are going to experience the large proportion of the age population ahead of the rest of New Zealand. And that is then reflected in why we want better quality footpaths, flat footpaths, why we want to invest some more in public transport. Acknowledging that over 65s have typically known the car as the way of getting around, and that it is going to be difficult to change the way that they move. So I guess there's a whole raft of reasons there, and there is some increased investment around footpaths, cycleways and public transport.
Okay, thanks for that. And then the other thing that we seem to be that we're going to be putting more chip seal into residential areas. Is that correct with this plan? So we're going to renewals that is currently asphalt will become chip seal in the future. Is that what we're sort of suggesting?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So where there is asphalt on a low volume road, then yes, that would, when it comes up for renewal, that would get put down in a chip seal, all things being equal.
Okay, given that we know how challenging that is for our community and people that have how do we plan to bring our community along with us on that subject?
So through the chair, perhaps I can answer that. So this was an issue that was canvassed at the workshops, and I know there were some alternative views from one or two councillors that indicated that we should be replacing like for like. And granted, no decisions were made at the workshop, but the strong flavour from those that attended the workshop is that we shouldn't be replacing like for like. And what we have proposed in that plan reflects the outcome of that workshop. In terms of how we communicate that with our residents, we agree, and that's one of the things that we will need to undertake and bring our customers along. We will obviously need to involve Paul Shattuck and his team in terms of how we do that, and there's a whole range of methods that we can do that. We haven't obviously formulated any of those plans yet, because this is formulating the LTP, but we do accept and understand that there will be a certain degree of communications with those residents in terms of when we actually come to renew those. But to give you a firm and fast plan, but there has been talk of separate communication plans, visits, etc., and we'll need to develop that as time goes by. But yes, we accept that we will need to bring residents along with us on that journey.
Because I was a lone voice in saying that like for like should be done, because people are used to the service level of service that they've got, and now you're dropping it. So we're going to reduce the rates in those areas? Maybe we should. Anyway, that's not what I was going to ask. I'm cherry picking a little bit because, as the Mayor said, this is a fairly solid document. So I'm just going to pick up on one item that concerns me, and that is that we seem to be trying to put people out of their cars because they're driving on their own. Now, I don't know where I'm supposed to find another person, because I've been looking for 11 years, 10 years, and I haven't found somebody. So I'm still alone. And I actually don't mind that, but it's not going to help me with this situation, because it seems that the council wants more people with people in the car. And I'm sorry, I haven't managed to pluck one up out of anywhere, but that's fine. But I'm not alone. There are lots of people on their own, and when these plans seem to be going, like if I'm looking at page 322, and we're changing this level of service, and thankfully I've got a youth counsellor next to me, because I couldn't read any of the top stuff, so she's told me that the final box says the reason for the change, and I don't know what the other boxes are, but I'm just, because they're white, and I can't read white on white. So we're going to the parking. We seem to have a thing about parking. We seem to not want people to use car parks. We are trying to put them into dining, which is fine. I'm really happy with that. But that gives us other issues. So we're looking at availability of long stay parking spaces in the interpeak as a percentage of the total long stay spaces within a 20-minute walk of the CBD. 20-minute walk is a long walk. Especially if it does say long stay, so I'm assuming this is for workers. So you can nod now. Is it designed for workers? Okay, it's designed. So it is for someone parking. So we're about to potentially put a market on an area where there are long stay car parks. I'm not sure where they're going to go, but anyway, I've raised it, so we'll see what happens with that. So we're now looking at the reason for the change is the new level of service supports the balanced approach. Makes sense.
Mr. Palmer, have we got any data on single occupancy vehicles as to why they are single occupancy vehicles? Have we got a way of determining that? Because I think that's pretty relevant.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we have, we collect data on the proportion of single occupancy vehicles on two of our arterial routes, but we haven't interviewed a section of the population to understand the reasons why.
Yeah, I think that, you know, myself, I'm a classic example. I come into a meeting, I don't know how long it might be, I need that independence, but I am a single occupant vehicle. Would it be possible to get better data on that? Because it could be that we are unable to change that pattern of usage.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the important point of what we're trying to raise and what I guess the thrust of some components of this plan is that we're wanting to provide transport choices for people. It's a key directive under the government policy statement, and that absolutely ride sharing is not right for everyone. Catching the bus is not right for everyone. Riding a bike is not right for everyone. But if we provide those choices, more people may take the opportunity to take it up.
Through the Chair, can I just ask Mr. Rees-Palmer, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been reading so many things, I've got things coming out my head, and I don't know what I'm retaining these days, but can you tell me, we had a long discussion about having better data, and that came through strongly from the workshop, and Worship the Mayor said data is king, and we accept that we need to have a data-based thing, evidence-based, that's based on data. We discussed about putting some money in the AMP that will allow us the ability to increase our data gathering. Am I correct?
Through the Chair, yes, that is correct. There's increased investment in data capture and data knowledge, both how people travel as well as the condition and quantity of our assets.
Yeah, and through the Chair, just on the modal shift, that also came through from the public transport plans, the workshop that we have, that it is about choice, and I don't know whether we've reached the maximum in terms of people walking and people cycling and how many are going to use the bus, but that's the constant dynamic situation that we're faced with, and it's something that we're dealing with in all these plans.
Yes, and then...
Okay, so my final comment is, when we're looking at these plans for the future, it's really hard to know why we're doing things when we don't know why we're doing them. So your very question, Mr. Chair, about why do people travel on their own? If we don't know that they would change, then this comment won't make any sense. If we decided that we got some data and 40% of the people that drive on their own go, I would change if this was the case, then we've got something to work with. But at the moment, it looks like we're trying to squeeze people out of vehicles when they're travelling alone, when they may never get out. So I just have a little dilemma in that, and I know until we get some data we won't know, but I just find it frustrating.
So through the Chair, I was going to say, and Councillor Noonan and I made eye contact, and I agree. We do need to have the data. We don't have some of that data. We know that we've got gaps, and that's accepted. We have put money in the AMP and the budgets to reflect that. But we have to hang our hat on somewhere. We can't not have a plan just because we don't have data. The data will either confirm or deny or enhance or remove those assumptions that we've made. But all asset management plans, not only this one, but all of them, are based on certain assumptions. And what we need to hope is that we got those assumptions as accurate as we can. Now, can I put my hand on my heart and say that all of those assumptions will be accurate? No, because I can't even make those assumptions on any of our other asset management plans, but they are assumptions. We have to hang our hat on certain things, and if there's specifics that we need to look at, then we'll look at those.
Thank you. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Could I just inquire as to what the committee's policy position was on parking that is informed to this? What policy position did the committee take in terms of parking to inform this asset management plan? No, I'm taking a policy position. Was the policy position to reduce levels of service in terms of availability to long stay parking? What was the policy position?
Mr. Palmer, can you recollect? I can't recollect exactly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the parking strategy was received by council but not adopted back in, I think, 2014. No. So I guess at this point in time we would have to look at the levels of service in terms of the policy direction. And there's two levels of service in this plan, one around the short stay parking within the CBD and one around the more longer stay parking on the fringes of the CBD.
I don't think that was quite my question. My question was to the committee. What was your policy position and direction to the people who are writing the plan? This is my concern, Mr. Chair, is that your role is to set the policy position as a committee, and I'm listening to the questions and I'm not hearing that you set a clear policy position. So as an example, council has not looked to change. We discussed the public transport matter the other day. You could increase, you could create, you could remove the 1 hour free parking, and you could double the price of car parking. And what this plan will tell you is that there'll be a cause and effect around that, potentially, and you'll migrate more people to cycling or more people potentially to public transport, although we're a little bit lacking in data as to know whether the causal link will be there. But I understood the committee's policy position was to leave the parking regime as is. But I'm not, so I'm just want some clarity as to whether there was a policy position given, and if there wasn't one, and I'm looking at this plan now, then I'm actually quite concerned about who is setting the policy.
Well, can I ask you a question? You're a member of that committee, so what do you recall?
I remember there being no change in terms of the parking regime staying as is, and the fact that it supports CBD businesses, and yes, we understand the transport link, but there was no change in that. And the parking strategy, as Mr. Palmer said, was not adopted by council. But what I'm seeing is elements of that coming through here, and I'm not sure that the committee gave that direction. Well, I'll ask you a second question in relation to this. What was the committee's, and I wasn't at all the workshops, Mr. Chair, I'm an ex officio former chair, I'm an ex officio member of all committees.
Correct.
And I come to committees when I'm concerned particularly about a matter, which is why I'm here today. What was the committee's policy position in relation to the Rocks Road walking and cycling project? What direction did you give the officers for writing the report?
So through the chair, if I may, I can answer the second one. The situation that we were facing with the Rocks Road was exactly the same position as we had in all the previous years. That is, that we would have an amount in, and I think it was from memory about $3 million, and that had been progressively carried over from year to year to year. The status of that has since changed in terms of the program business case, which whether we workshop that with councillors, and I'm giving you my opinion at the moment, you may say that opinion is wrong. Thank you, Mr. Levertis, we don't agree with you. But until such time, so the status quo as at the last workshops was to keep that status quo. There was no direction given that we shouldn't keep that status quo, because there had been no indication as to where we were going. We didn't know where the program business case was. We had been asking. The elections crept up on us, and we would have kept that status quo. One of the things that we have known since those workshops, and new information that's to hand, is that we've got the program business case, which makes a whole lot of recommendations and suggestions, which we need to workshop through. We have an outcome based on the central government election, which is another influence. What we sought to do is, on that particular case, is preempt that, and that is something that I discussed with the chair and the deputy chair in terms of putting in a placeholder in terms of what the Rocks Road could look like. So on that particular aspect, that has changed. But that has been changed as a result of information that is to hand, and we were protecting, we believe, our council's position in terms of how we see that playing out. Now, the reality of that is that may play out very differently how we see it. But all we have done is put a placeholder. It doesn't really affect the first 3 years. It may do, but the majority of that money is based in post the 3 years. And yes, as per all our asset management plans, we have made assumptions. And the assumptions are that we need to work with NZTA and central government to figure out, once a government is in place, what that all means. And if this committee feels that that position that we've put down as officers in connection with Rocks Road is an incorrect assumption, we're happy to take that out the asset management plan. But that is one small aspect of a larger asset management plan, and it's a crystal ball gazing thing. So if we've got the assumptions based on Rocks Road incorrect, happy to have that discussion. I just don't think having a workshop around that until we've had the opportunity to speak to NZTA and central government and to figure out who the central government is going to change the essence of this asset management plan. But the information that we have received, we've tried to react as officers in a dynamic situation as best we can. Now, if we've got that wrong, happy to discuss that, but I have discussed it with the Chair and the Deputy Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry that I'm going to come back on this, and I'm apologising committee because the Chair and Deputy Chair haven't discussed it with the Mayor. I'm sorry, Mr. Ludwig, that does leave you in a little bit of a position. But I'm concerned about this, and I could not raise it because I could go, well, it could be quite a, advantageous to future negotiations, but I actually don't think that's reasonable for this committee. What I'm seeing in here is essentially you have selected, without discussing with the committee, option 3 from the Rocks Road project, but at 51%, you're presuming that the state highway moves. No, I'm sorry. As much as that might be what I might personally favour, in fairness to the other people sitting at the table, I just don't think that's reasonable. I really don't think that you can start making those presumptions.
Do we leave it blank?
Well, I'm sorry to cross, but I'm sorry. It just is. I'm very uncomfortable around something that is so important to the city, which involves a presumption on something that we have not had a discussion about as a council. I think you just, sometimes timing doesn't help our asset management plans, but once you start putting those presumptions in here, I want to make sure that all of the committee understands what is here. It's just not reasonable otherwise. I'm sorry, and perhaps I'm best to just deal with this when this meeting's concluded, and if I need to bring it back by notice of motion, I may have to do that, unless it lies on the...
I have to say in defence that I'm actually finding your comments annoying, because we have discussed this, and we had to put something in there as a placement. We can't leave it blank. And we will make the best presumptions that we can at the time to keep these projects alive. And that's what we've done, subject to the government.
Councillor Laurie.
If I may, through the Chair, if the committee thinks that I have made, if we as officers have made an error of judgment in terms of Rocks Road, based on the dynamic situation that we have been faced, then as an officer, I'm willing to take that and remove that from the asset management plan and that particular aspect. But if that's the decision that this committee makes, I'm happy for that. I believe, though, that the assumptions that we've made in terms of the dynamic situation that we were facing as an officer was, for us, pertinent at the time. But I accept to worship the Mayor's comments. But we're faced in a situation that things change.
I think at this particular point, we will adjourn to have a break. Right? And we'll come back, continue from where we were. Now, please, and we will reconvene the meeting, and we've got some explanation and direction from our CEO as to where we are at the moment.
Okay, through the Chair and Councillors, just want to first of all acknowledge that the last few months of a long-term plan have been incredible for both you and also for staff in a time that I think in many areas of the Council we're in a crossroads. And that's just simply added to the pressure that's been on everybody. One hand to delivery, and secondly, that pressure against having good conversation to actually arrive at it. So I just want to acknowledge that we are in a bit of a cauldron of those things coming together at the same time. And this one here is one of the most substantial asset areas and service areas of the Council, which in more recent times has had the spotlight on it politically and nationally. And there are decisions that are inside of here that we can't anticipate right now. Until Winston makes a decision on the 12th, we are a little bit flying in the dark. Leading up to today, my crystal ball told me we might even have to do 2 lots of long-term plan budgets, one with Southern Link or whatever is in and one with it out. It doesn't seem like an efficient way of doing it, and so we have been in this kind of dilemma about how to handle this particular issue. What are our combined wisdoms of both the elected side and the staff side have agreed on a process going forward is that after Winston makes his decision, then we hold a strategic workshop at that point to understand what the implications will be and how they will impact on this particular asset management plan, and also pick up some of the issues that we've lost in the speed of the moment. And some of them have been raised today, and we'll get a better list of that before that workshop, such as parking and some of those types of issues. What will happen from then is that we will likely, Stuart, have to reconvene another another meeting of Works and Infrastructure, then to adopt a new direction and plan that is then forwarded on up to Council, and its meeting is on November the 9th. We believe we do have the time inside of there, so the advice today is that this lay on the table. The conversation is great because we're picking up the range of both strategic and also service delivery questions that we need to put a little bit more work into between now and the next extraordinary meeting of the Works and Infrastructure. So I guess thank you for what you've brought up today. I just want to put that in the context as I have about just what a cauldron of time frame and big issues that we've faced all coming together at the same time. So in the meantime, we need to probably pick up some of those issues that we've been a little light on for that next workshop. Parking, I've just heard coming up around the discussion, but there may well be others as well that need a little bit more exploring out. So thank you through the Chair. That's hopefully that's an explanation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, David, for a very well-rounded description of the situation that we're all finding ourselves in at the present time. I would like to move that this plan lie on the table.
I'll second that.
Got a seconder? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? No. I'll put the motion.
Just before you do, just procedurally, Mr. Chair, you may need to specify when. So I'm just running around standing orders. Yes. Just suggest you take some advice on standing orders.
Can we just take a second?
Yep, have a pause.
So through the Chair, it'll have to be referred to the next extraordinary Works and Infrastructure Committee meeting when that is called.
The mover happy with that?
I'm happy with that, yes.
And seconder happy with that? Okay, so with that amendment, everyone clear where we're at? I'll put it then. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, we now go to item 10, the Solid Waste Asset Management Plan, and invite Mr. Hiart to come to the table. So we're referring pages 68 to 146.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just give a bit of context before I start, and that is waste management and minimisation is an interesting field. The funding model in New Zealand is quite varied. Waste management, removal of rubbish, is generally user pays. Waste minimisation is funded from different ways. Ratepayers in some areas. It is user pays systems, and then they're subsidised from the activity. In Nelson, we use that last method, which is subsidised from the solid waste activity. So basically, our funds come from the landfill charges. So in New Zealand, there's a general movement towards user pays for waste minimisation and management. Tauranga is considered the benchmark. Their officers are not happy with where they are, so the benchmark that other people seem to be aspiring to is not necessarily supported by their staff, because they find that there are many adverse effects, and they see a decrease in recycling, reuse, and all of those good things that we see as sustainable. We conducted a workshop on the 18th of May and distributed the notes of that meeting on the 1st of June 2017. In this plan, we attempted to cover all of those issues raised at that workshop. I think the important thing in this plan is to understand that the landfill business unit is formed during this period, and this plan does not cover the landfills. The input from the landfills is basically on the funding part of the plan. I'm generally going to accept that everybody's read this plan, and what I would like to suggest is that when you look at this plan, the metrics that we look at solid waste, other than one, seems to be going in the right direction. So we seem to be doing better at waste minimisation, diverting waste away from the landfill. The one metric that is going north is landfill charges. Now, that is for obvious reasons. And we hope that the regional landfill business unit formation will in future consolidate that. This plan is driven by the same policy as TDC mainly, and on an official basis we have consulted on the plan. So the two strategies or solid waste plans for TDC and Nelson are running more or less in parallel but there is a big difference. The solid waste management activity has a big component of rural into it, so there is a significant change in that. I think that's all I want to say. Oh, one other thing, there is a table in here on page, unallocated funds, local waste disposal levy. When you look at that, you can see that there's a significant amount of unallocated funds, and the reason for that is that the way that the landfill business unit was put together and it is funded is that the two councils receive the same, call it dividend, from the landfill, and that reflects that value. Now that money can be put into a surplus in the transfer station fund or alternative place, but it will be ring-fenced within the activity. So it could be used to that we don't, if we get sprung by a surprise in future, we can possibly try and fund it from there. Yeah, so I'll take questions now.
Thank you. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Barker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Johan, is it correct? Is my calculations correct that there's been an increase in fees of about 14% for many of the waste collection processes that the people of Nelson have to meet by way of paying for skips or bags or other things to a collector?
That is. I wouldn't be able to say it's 14%, but that is the range that it should be in. Yes, and we earlier this year, in I think it was January, we had a look at what is happening in Dunedin and some other councils, and they actually brought the cost increases associated with the ETS through earlier, so that it doesn't come as a big surprise. So they were a little bit more proactive possibly than us, and left and started dealing with it. So in their charges, this cost came through already in February this year. So we sort of like delayed the implementation of that until the 1st of August. So yeah, so I think there was a slight benefit, but yes, there is pressure on landfill charges.
That was the point I just wanted to make, Mr. Chairman, that people don't realise it in our community, but they are actually paying an awful lot for the service that we provide to have a landfill. I know we're doing a good job on it, but people have just got to know it's quite an expensive process, and it has increased this year.
Councillor Matheson?
Oh, can you just give me that page number?
Yes, he didn't say what it was.
And which you showed
79, is that the surplus?
surpluses? Yeah.
Yeah, page, big number 79.
Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Rutledge?
Thank you. Just wondering if you could help me out with the page 70, bottom of 76 and 77, the estimates of costs, with the costing model being the financial cost plus the environmental cost. Seems to have the recycling coming up very, very expensive. Do we get a revenue stream from that recycling that then offsets that, or?
Recycling, sorry, I've got a problem because the page numbers for the agenda, if you could maybe...
so 6 and 7.
Page 6 and 7.
The report numbers probably.
Yep. Here, this is helpful. Recycling is for the residential customers are at no charge. And that is the big difference between us and, for instance, Tauranga, where you pay for everything. In Auckland, they're starting to charge now for recycling, and some of the services where they broadened the services in Christchurch, where they've extended the curbside type recycling to businesses. They also charge the businesses, so they don't give that. They don't subsidise it by ratepayers. So yes, we don't get anything back from it. That money is for Nelson. It gives us we fund it from the landfill income. In TDC, they're still running short by about $1 million a year, which is funded by ratepayers.
Councillor Noonan?
Thank you.
That's part of our metrics, and what is quite pleasing it has decreased recently. So we used to have it quite low, and then about a year ago, 2 years ago, it started increasing the contaminated material. It has gone down. What is also quite pleasing is that our recycling tonnage has increased. So since we've introduced the wheelie bin system, we've seen a significant increase. So about 18 months ago, for the first time, TDC, just after they implemented their wheelie bins for about 6 months, they actually went past us. They were recycling more than us. And yesterday I got a report that we're now ahead of them again. So yeah, so it's looking pretty good. So, but I think the real pleasing thing for me is that in general, now don't quote me, but in general, contaminated recycling in New Zealand runs right about 24%. In Nelson, we are in the single digits. So we think the last one that I checked was 6%. So it's really good. 24% of the material collected at curbside for recycling is thrown back into a landfill. But in Nelson, that is 6%. Yes.
We've recently been seeing that there is a soft plastic recycling. So how is that going to through our system or somewhere else?
That is a national initiative, and through our waste minimisation process and planning, that is the place that we believe that belongs, that we get a national program. We are looking to support that, so through education and through all our programs that we put out, because it is still important that recycling is actually your duty, and it's not the council's duty. It is our duty to facilitate and to just shape the environment that people can do it, but otherwise it's the individual's responsibility.
Thank you, Johan. That's all good news by the sound of it. The only other question I've got is whether I've been telling lies to people. Because if there is contaminated products or things that you can't recycle in your recycling bin, does it actually contaminate the whole truck?
It could. So basically, when our contractors pick that up, they will. And they've got a big concern, they will try and trace down who it is and go and speak to those people or refuse accepting it. But it could. But in general, the 6% is what is diverted at the transfer station. So this does not reflect the recycling that's not accepted at curbside. So but I don't know what that volume is, but it is not a lot.
Yes, so through the chair, we do know that anecdotally that NELMEC does sometimes refuse to pick up stuff, even in the bottles, because it is contaminated, but they leave a note. But generally, people are quite good. They also check sometimes before it goes into the thing. But as Johan said, depending on what's in there, it could well contaminate. But I don't think it's a big issue in Nelson. It's quite compliant, actually. I do, yes.
Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we recycling more than we can recycle? I see it's gone up for this year. I mean, it's great that we're recycling, but is there an end customer for it? Or?
Oh, that is a good question. Just a joke. I've got a comment on that too. So basically, what is happening in the world is that China is trying to manage these systems better. They were like an end of the pipeline situation where they just received everything, and they are becoming much more conscious of that good product can add value to their processes. So if you've got good product, they continue accepting it. But there is fundamentally, with nationalism all across the world happening more and more, one can see that there could be a resistance. So the industry in New Zealand is transforming itself. We're getting more and more options to treat and to remanufacture in New Zealand. So the soft plastics are going to Melbourne. That's not local, but it's just the extension of the western island. But yeah. So that is true, And it could be one of those things that can have an effect on how effective we are doing it, because it's quite possible that you'll see some increases in costs. But I think, by my understanding right now, is that our recycling, the recycling product coming from New Zealand, is still quite desirable. Another thing that's quite important to note, which is the glass recycling. So a lot of the glass is being remanufactured. Most of our glass now is being remanufactured. In the past, a lot was used for crushing and trenches, but most of it is now being recycled.
That's good to know, because I know the glass went for an area we just have stockpiling it, and it's probably just to bury it back in the ground. And soft plastics, that raises a concern for me whether it's more hype than reality, because with low density plastics, there's only so much you can actually do with it, which is the reason why it's not recycled. But you're saying that Melbourne would be able to take all our, is that right? Would they be able to take all our soft plastics, or are we just trying to keep up a feel-good scenario?
No, they use it for furniture manufacturing, park benches and stuff like that. There's also a move in in the UK where they're using it to offset offset petroleum products in the manufacturing of bitumen. So that's something that's quite interesting too.
One quick comment. Our page 101, but your page 31. Yeah, our page 101 and your page 31. The second paragraph, landfilling recyclable material provides the lowest cost solution. Am I reading that on face value, that the cheapest way is really just to bury the recyclable material?
I would say, I would prefer not to give an answer to that, but if you want my personal opinion, it is not, recycling is not on a triple bottom line calculation the cheapest. But the benefit that you get is the message about sustainability. The messaging going out because of solid waste management to the public about avoiding waste, avoiding stuff, actually goes right across it. It creates an attitude of people getting friends and drive together in a car.
Okay, no, thank you for that. So that sort of just raised my concerns, how much energies and efforts we are sometimes recycling the unrecyclable or over-recycling, but there's some very good positives coming through from that. Thank you.
All right. Matt Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Johan. I'm a bit dubious. I mean, I think soft plastic recycling, drop-off places at supermarkets are a small step forward. But I think if you want to have less plastic in the environment, you have to reduce the amount of plastic going out the door of businesses and so on. So I'm wondering, and if I have looked for it, if it's here and I've missed it, apologies. But why can't Nelmac pick up soft plastic?
So,
as part of our service.
Yes, I think that's part of the contamination problem that they've got at the sorting station, transfer station. So we are investigating at the moment that we will also have a drop-off point at the transfer station. So it will be a separated drop-off point where we will collect soft plastics. But soft plastics, the better solution for soft plastics is like my wife does it. I don't do recycling. She's the boss. I do it because she tells me to. But basically those products go back to where they came from. And it is a real, because we often in New Zealand, I mean, when I was in South Africa, I had 2 deep freezers. So we never went shopping. But in New Zealand, it's just the way we live. We often visit those places. And those should be the hubs where you can take things that you can transport up and down. It's one trip. You don't have to drive another trip. You can just go to that place. So a lot of our initiatives are around, not to do an extra trip, but do it at the same time.
So through the chair, following that logic, we wouldn't do any curbside recycling. We would just tell everyone to take the containers back to the shops where the products came from.
No, that's not possible because it is not logistically possible because the yeah, it's just not logistically possible. We could discuss that for a long time, but when it comes to soft plastics and plastic bags and the print that we leave on the environment, absolutely important that we get to, but this is a national strategy, and I think if we, the best possible way that we can deal with it is what we're doing, supporting the government and asking the government to put levies maybe on plastic bags so that people are more conscious, because that is the point. It is about being conscious. What I can promise you also is that when we take your plastic bag in the rubbish bin, it stays in our landfill. It's not in the trees. We keep that, we manage a reasonably good landfill, and our rubbish stays in our landfill.
So, through the chair, I hear what you're saying about contamination, but the plastic that goes into from a bin into, so you're saying it goes from the bin into the truck, and if it wasn't separated out at that point, it would contaminate the other recyclables.
No, what it does is when it is loose inside the recycling, when you visit the transfer station where they separate the material out, the optical pickup of material, what it is, gets confused by the plastic, the loose bags, the soft plastics, and that is why it is diverted away from that stream. So it is a little bit a function of the intelligence that we use at the transfer station. In the past, when we had our own transfer station, that wouldn't have been a problem because it was hand sorted. At this one, it's got a big component of automation and then hand sorting. And the problem is that it confuses and it makes it, it just makes it unmanageable.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to have to keep going.
So may I say, in terms of the stuff that's been put into, the amount of soft plastics has decreased, because that's the whole point. You actually put it in a bin. You don't have to tie it up in a plastic bag and put it on the thing. So you put it in the bin, it's closed, so that contamination is right down.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying through the chair is that I get a lot of people telling me, like heaps of people telling me, that they want curbside soft plastic recycling. And I hear what you're saying, that the technology doesn't work at the at the recycling centre, but is that service available in other cities?
No, separation of soft plastics is, I'm not aware of anywhere. I'm not aware of anywhere where there's a curbside separation of soft plastics.
So nowhere is taking soft plastics at curbside recycling.
I've been looking into it, and but and we will have to look at where it goes. And basically, what the model I'm looking at is that if you've got soft plastics and you compress them and put them into a contained bag, but that is still under investigation, and I would leave that for a while, because again it is about, because what happens then is it is now a compact unit, and it will probably be able to be sorted but that is still work in progress.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that is work we need to do, because the amount of soft plastic, as much as we'd like it to reduce, isn't likely to if we keep the present settings. And while I appreciate being able to go to New World and take our soft plastic down there, I suspect that the only people who are going to do that really are the same people who are already turning up with their reusable bags. The number of people who are actually going to pick up that service, I don't think is going to be massive. I hope it is, but the easier we can make it for people, the better. So I would love us to see in the next 10 years us spend more energy on finding a way to make curbside soft plastic recycling possible in Nelson.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at your pages 32 and 33, Johan, and as always, I'm concerned about the cost of services to our community. So I note on page 33, one of our desires that solid waste services must be affordable in the long term, and that customers want the cost of services to be sustainable over the long term. Great. Then if you refer back to page 32, over the page there, page 32, the bottom bullet point, with the increase in landfilling cost and the cost of managing green waste at Pascoe Street, a significant increase And subsidy will be required to further increase green waste diversion through the Pascoe Street transfer station. What sort of magnitude does significant mean here? Because we all pay for this. We don't realise we're paying for it through our rates by subsidies to these things.
I think that 30%, I think I calculated $80 instead of 48.
So significant.
Yeah.
We should all realise this. Thanks.
Any, Councillor Rutledge?
Sorry, I'm sure it's in here somewhere, but what is the user pays portion of our landfill? So when we put one of the blue bags that we buy from the supermarket out on that curb and pay what $2.80 for it or something, how much of the cost of that is that $2.80 covering?
So $137 is our landfill charge, including GST. $90 of that $137 are going to fund carbon credits, waste levies, and local waste levies. So in other words, $90 of every $137 is going back to recycling and supporting solid waste. So you can say $90 out of every $170 is a subsidy. It's not the cost of the landfill. It's not what the so if we were just doing a landfill and we didn't have to pay any subsidies and we just chuck everything into the landfill, the cost of the landfill per ton would have been around about $40 a ton, $36 a ton.
Okay, so maybe I'm just not keeping up, but I didn't quite follow that. So on that calculation, what would the cost of a blue bag then become?
It will
so in terms of actually what somebody puts out on their curbside every week.
57 cents.
So 57 cents.
Yes, as to the 210 cents
instead of $2.80 or whatever they are. Okay.
Yeah.
But then we'd have to put all our recycling and everything else in one of those bags, wouldn't we? So the volume would increase.
Yeah, so you will have more bags. So maybe that marginal cost will even come down to 43 cents.
Okay. Also, just a comment more than anything, what you just seem to be explaining about getting the electronic sorting machine to recognise soft plastic in a form and therefore it could all go through the same recycling stream sounds like a fantastic idea. So if you pull that off, well done.
Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, two questions, Mr. Chair. Thanks. Notice in the asset management plan, not a lot of mention about building waste and construction materials. What proportion is that in terms of the waste that's going into the system? Do you know? It was quite a sizable a year or two back.
Yes, it is well explained in the waste assessment, which we've completed earlier this year, which will be coming to you in November. We at York Valley, we do not see this a major issue because we've got other landfills, cleanfill landfills, where a lot of our contractors who own landfills actually recycle that material. So we don't see this as, I wouldn't like to say now to you it's 10%, but I do have the statistic somewhere, so I could send it to you. But it will be explained in the waste assessment.
No further questions? Would someone like to move that we receive the report and approve? Do we have a seconder? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Skinner? No further discussion? Oh, sorry, Mayor?
Given a discussion on soft plastic recycling, I hope everybody has gone on to bagvote.co.nz and cast their vote as to whether they are going to be prepared to pay for plastic bags in the future. So I encourage everybody to get on and do that. And
I think paying for a plastic bag is probably a very reasonable thing to start curbing our behaviour of taking lots of them. A really interesting discussion. If Johan can pull off curbside recycling, the mechanics around that are really difficult for soft plastics. But I have to say that the step that we've just had from our local supermarkets and collecting soft plastics is a really good step forward, and we need to do all we can to promote that, because the biggest issue there is actually making sure people know. It's actually quite fun. I have to say, it's quite fun. I've got my plastic bags, they're all my bits sitting in the back seat of my car, because I'm going to drive down there to get my groceries, and it's a really amazing thing once you start collecting all the little bits, just how much you cannot avoid, even though you use your own cloth bags to take down. So I suggest you get on and vote, and you also start collecting the soft plastics and getting them back to the supermarket.
All right, so it's moved. Oh, sorry, Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, just going to comment from a practical sense. From a practical sense, as the report suggests, and Johan commenting, there is probably a sweet spot. There's a point where you can overspend a lot of energies and times and resources recycling, and costing. If you're driving down to the supermarket to drop off some bags, you're probably doing a bigger impact than you're trying to save. So what I'm saying there is, and from a practical sense, sometimes I believe, not get too caught up in the feel good, but look at the actual figures there, and it becomes a crossover point when you spend too much energies trying to collect, deliver, separate, clean, and then send to market recyclable material, which may not be completely recyclable, and even if it is, you're costing yourself. And there's a point there that maybe just compacting it, burying it, is the cheapest way for ratepayer, which leads me to my philosophy is that you try to avoid this at the source, and that's probably what Councillor Laurie's indicating there, is at the source, and as much as you can be self-sufficient from your home, with growing your vegetables rather than buying a pre-packed few broccoli sprouts, can be a much more conservative methodology. And my other concern and philosophy, and a lot of our decisions we make, and a lot of the pushback we get from community, is that they often comes back saying it's council's issue to get rid of rubbish or recycle, and often it comes back to us as individuals to think about how we use materials, don't use materials, if we can recycle them, reuse them in our home, whether it be composting, etc., or plastics, etc., reusing those bags at home for your home use, putting the muddy soccer boots in, or etc., etc. But I get concerned that it's a public entitlement, a social mover thing that council need to solve us. We need to do that, but in reality that becomes a snowballing cost on resources. So just a bit of reflection on that. Some of the practicality is are we recycling more than we can recycle?
It's called embodied energy. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. So the next item, would someone like to move that we go into public excluded? Move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Laurie. Been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Carried.